Hello, guys. Today I want to talk to you about the top 7 foods that destroy your heart. Did you know that cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer globally, and that more than 19 million people die from cardiovascular disease every year? So it is super important we identify these foods that destroy our heart, causing cardiovascular disease and death, and do something about them immediately. You see, the food we eat is the major underlying fundamental factor for cardiovascular disease. Firstly, we need to understand step by step the cascade of events that lead to a heart disease. Heart disease or cardiovascular disease is caused by damaged blood vessel. What then causes this damage? There are two things responsible for this damage, and they are inflammation and oxidation or oxidative stress. These are the end tools that afflict the damage. If these two are responsible, the question is what causes this inflammation and oxidative stress? You see, there are a number of adaptations or mechanisms in our bodies that cause these two problems. But the most major common mechanism or adaptation is called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance causes both inflammation and oxidation. And insulin resistance is the #1 problem for the vast majority of people, but it is not the only problem. Things like stress, toxin can also cause a heart disease without having insulin resistance. But interestingly, constant stress trigger high cortisol, and high cortisol also causes insulin resistance. So anyway you look at it, insulin resistance is always at the center. And what is the #1 problem with insulin resistance? That is sugar, which I'm going to explain as we go on. You see, if you look at this cascade or sequence of events that cause blood vessel damage, we really know what to do to reverse or avert the situation, because insulin resistance is not a disease. It is actually an adaptation. It is a temporary situation in most cases that the body has developed based on our lifestyle. So once we begin to change our lifestyle for the better, the adaptation will be reversed in most cases. So the final question will be, what foods cause insulin resistance that destroy our hearts, leading to cardiovascular disease and even death? The top 7 foods that destroy our heart is, the seventh on the list is rice. Yes, the very popular staple food called rice. Though not as bad as the other food that I'm going to talk about, rice can also be a problem. You see, rice is a carbohydrate, which is starch, and starch is actually a long chain of 100% glucose that is broken down in our bodies as glucose or blood sugar, and therefore spike insulin as a response to bring down the sugar. But we take an excess all day long, and for a long period of time, it becomes too much for the body to handle because of the surge in insulin. And your body will begin to reject this high insulin surge or spike, leading to insulin resistance. And you see, years ago, the Asians did eat so much rice, but they didn't have any heart problem. And that is because they didn't eat rice with all these processed foods or drinks or soft drinks we have today. They were physically active. Though they ate rice 3 times in a day, they didn't snack in between meals like they do today. There were no processed foods, and the rice was really much organic and whole, and not the ones we have today. So if you are eating all these, you end up with insulin resistance, and then rice becomes a bad thing because it keeps you from reversing it. And starch, is 100% sugar, and that includes the potatoes, the corn, the tapioca, and some other grains. The sixth food that can destroy our heart is ultra processed foods. You see, whole foods like nuts, meats, fish, tubers, fruits, eggs, are natural whole foods produced in their natural form. But when we chop them up, dry them, pulverize them, add things, and put them in a box or cans, they become what we call ultra processed foods. And that type of foods today contain the highest amount of calories, which is becoming very problematic. You see, the health dangers with these ultra processed foods are that, #1, they are full of sugar, toxic chemicals like the preservatives, flavoring agents that make them very addictive, dyes, salts, and seed oils, often the hydrogenated ones, and most of them are devoid of the healthy nutrient because of the hard processing, so they can last longer. But it is very bad for us and very bad for the heart because they are not actually food anymore. And as a result, the whole world is becoming overfed with ultra processed foods and then at the same time undernourished. You see, the addictive nature of these foods with their bliss point leads to overeating. And as a result, we clog up the body, leading to metabolic syndrome like insulin resistance, which leads to a heart disease. Now, what is the fit food that destroy our heart? And that is fast foods, which are type of ultra processed foods. And again, the problem with these foods are that they are highly refined with pure sugar and drenched with toxic seed oils, cooked under high heat, becoming more rancid, increasing the free radical damage to the blood vessels and a lot of oxidative stress in the body. And what is worse, these oils are often repeatedly used like the fried foods, taking some soda or even milkshake. And if you wanted to fry your food once a while, it is better to use butter, lard, tallow, coconut oil under a very low heat. Then we move on to the fourth food that destroy our heart, and that is alcohol. Yes, alcohol. You see, when you take alcohol, your body secretes an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase, which breaks down alcohol. But when we have excess alcohol over time, it overwhelms the liver because the liver is the only place where you can process and break down alcohol to neutralize it. When we overwhelm the liver, we create fatty liver, which becomes insulin resistant, and this leads to clogged arteries, setting you up for cardiovascular disease. Because once you have a fatty liver, you almost 100% have clogged arteries with plaques. And if you want to drink alcohol, which I don't recommend, then less is better. And pure liquor is the best because it is basically sugar-free. The next better one will be wine, and wine is a fermented grape which has a lot of sugar. All right, but the sugar or the yeast inside consumes a lot of the sugar, so the sugar is pretty much gone. Again, I don't recommend alcohol, but if you're going to take some, then these ones might be okay for you. And a worse version of alcoholic beverage will be beer. In fact, most people with a heart disease or who died from a heart disease are beer lovers. And beer has a lot of carbohydrate. It is made from the grain, that is the malt. And the worst of them all will be the mixed alcoholic beverages or drinks because it is loaded with so much sugar from all these alcohols mixed together. And so having these two things, alcohol and sucrose, that only the liver can process, is double warming for the liver to handle. Now we come to the top three foods that destroy your heart. And the third one is the toxic seed oils. You see, seed oils are made from seeds, and it's not easy to get oil out of a seed. So they have to apply a very high heat, pressure, and sometimes chemicals. And in doing that, the fat in these seeds become oxidized and rancid. These vegetable seeds or oils include the corn oil, the soy oil, the canola oil, the GMO rapeseed oil, sunflower oil, and so many others. These oils are what you find in the ultra processed foods and the fast food joint. These are the kinds that are really bad. You see, not all vegetable oils are bad if it is minimally processed, just like extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, or even walnut oil. These are the good ones, especially if it is cold pressed, retaining most of their flavor because it wasn't harshly processed. Now, what is the second food on the list that destroys your heart and sets you up for cardiovascular disease and death? And that is margarine. Yes, margarine. Margarine is a type of or an example of trans fats. And trans fat, you should always remember, is double trouble for the heart. Yes, trans fat is very double trouble for the heart. And margarine is a type of trans fat. And what is worse is that margarine is made from these toxic oils we just spoke about. And it even becomes worse when these oils are partially or fully hydrogenated to turning them into solid or spreadable state, turning into what we call trans fat. Trans fat is really super toxic and damages the function of your mitochondria. That is your source of cell energy for the overall function and basically poisons them. You see, your longevity is mostly dependent on your mitochondria. How long you will live here on this earth depends on the state of your mitochondria, and this trans fat actually poisons your mitochondria. These mitochondria are very sensitive to oxidation and free radicals, and these trans fats increase the free radical formation or production by 10 folds, poisoning the mitochondria. And if you see a product labeled zero trans fat, it doesn't mean that that food or that product do not contain trans fat. It actually means 0.5 grams of trans fat in that product per serving. And though this amount is very small, it can still cause problems, and you need to avoid that food or product immediately. So now we come to the number one worst food that destroys our heart, and that is, I gave you a clue at the beginning, and that is sugar. Yes, our popular white ingredient called sugar. This is the number one food that destroys the heart. The reason sugar is number one is because sugar is virtually found in all these bad foods we've talked about so far. It is empty calories, it has no nutrient, and upset virtually all the metabolic processes in the body. And it is 50% fructose, which acts very much like alcohol, increasing fatty liver. It is very addictive because it doesn't leave any sense of fullness at all, and includes things like the added sugar, that is the white sugar, soda, high fructose corn syrup, cookies, the ice creams, the cakes, the dessert, and even barbecue sauce. Sugar is virtually in all processed foods, and there's no difference between white sugar, brown sugar, high fructose corn syrup, agave, honey, molasses, or even dextrose. They are all the same, but with different combinations or ratio. So though one may be better than the other, it doesn't mean that they are good for us. It is still going to create insulin resistance, and it's going to prevent a reversal. Now you may ask, what about fruit? You see, actually no fruit is bad unless you already have insulin resistance. So most people can eat some amount of food, but if you are trying to reverse a situation or a condition, then don't take fruit. The sugar in the fruit is fructose and glucose, but with different ratios. So it's still going to spike insulin, causing insulin resistance. So if you are metabolically healthy, enjoy some food. But if you are a diabetic or trying to reverse a condition like a fatty liver, then cut down to a bare minimum. Some berries is okay for you, and then eat more of the green leafy vegetables. Very important. You see, sugar is at the heart of insulin resistance, the underlying cause of inflammation and oxidation, which cause blood vessel damage, leading to heart disease. So these are the top 7 foods that destroy the heart, causing cardiovascular disease and death. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video right up here. Your health, your life. God bless you.